What was my other point?
This is Farm to Markets number 11. Today we're talking about El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin, the Social Security Trustees Report, and the deep litter method for chicken coops. El Salvador was the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender on Tuesday, allowing the currency to be used in any transaction from buying groceries to paying taxes. The move has been celebrated by the international Bitcoin community, while some in El Salvador are skeptical. Alex, what is your opinion on El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin?
Well, in general, with cryptocurrencies and in any currency really that can be as volatile as Bitcoin has been and probably will continue to be for a while, it's difficult to see why anybody would want to spend a currency that might be worth tomorrow or worth more tomorrow than it's worth today, or why somebody might want to accept a currency today that might be worth less tomorrow. That being said, if cryptocurrencies can somewhat stabilize in value, then I don't see why it couldn't be just as viable as really any other currency. But when it comes to El Salvador in particular, it doesn't seem like the primary reason for them adopting it is to be on the cutting edge of, cryptocurrency or anything like that. It seems to be that they want to save $400 million in fees that their population loses on remittances when they transmit it back from primarily the United States via companies like Western Union and others. An extra $400 million in the pockets of Salvadorans spending locally, that's a big boost to the economy, probably a bigger boost than adopting Bitcoin on its own would be. That is assuming everybody uses it, and that's the big question mark. I'm very skeptical that that's going to work, considering half the country, the poorest half, doesn't even have internet access in El Salvador. So I'm not really sure how they're supposed to access this new financial system in general. So I'm interested to see how it goes, but I'm generally just skeptical all around.
Joe, what do you think?
There's a lot of moving parts here. We could certainly talk about Bitcoin, or we can talk about how Bitcoin impacts El Salvador. For the sake of brevity, I think I'll talk about how Bitcoin might impact El Salvador. To Alex's point, $400 million in transaction fees through Western Union to send money back to their hometowns in El Salvador. That's quite a bit of money for a small developing economy. I've seen conflicting reports. This just happened a couple of days ago. One source says that this is going to be considered legal tender. Another source says that this is going to be forced tender, which means that people will be required to use Bitcoin for transactions in El Salvador. That's going to be very difficult to do when half the population doesn't have internet access or a cell phone. I think that their young, dynamic, highly popular president is willing to try new and innovative things. And Bitcoin is certainly new and innovative. Remains to be seen whether it's going to have more of a positive impact or negative impact than some of the other policies El Salvadorian presidents have tried over the last 5 decades.
Drew?
I agree with Alex. I remain pretty skeptical on the stability of Bitcoin. I think we talked about Bitcoin in an earlier episode. And we talked about how there's 2 main ways to approach it. You can treat it as a capital asset in a speculative investment, or you can treat it as a medium of exchange. And right now, it's just way too unstable to be treated as a medium of exchange. So I'll be curious to see how it is going forward. All the people invested in it, I don't know if they're going to like the fact that El Salvador is adopting this, as it kind of took a crash on the day one. They're calling it B-Day.
The goal of using Bitcoin isn't to be on the cutting edge. I think it's more of an attention grab than anything, because it's similar to when they adopted the US dollar back in 2001. The idea was to try to make a company more attractive to outside business. I was looking at some statistics on there, and the homicide rate in El Salvador is that per 100,000 people, you can expect 83 to die because of homicide. And that's just in 2021. So that's not particularly attractive to business. So kind of like Alex says that, the idea isn't to be on the absolute cutting edge. It's just more of an attention grabbing idea to try and attract business to the area, which I don't think is going to go well if corruption and murder is going to be as high as it is right now.
Well, in defense of the president of El Salvador, it's possible that by using Bitcoin, there'll be less reason for economic murders. When El Salvador has got an economy where 70% of all transactions are done in US dollars, I'm not talking about writing checks or credit cards. I'm talking about in cold, hard cash. So when you buy groceries or gas or make your rent payment, you're doing that with cold, hard cash. Well, if people don't have cold, hard cash because they've got their wealth stored in encryption data on their cell phones, there might be less incentives to kill people to get their money. So what will be interesting to see is that if there'll be a new level of crime on learning how to steal people's Bitcoins. And if that if in fact happens, we should see El Salvador be the laboratory for those sorts of physical crimes in the future.
It might be helpful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, the first person through the wall always gets bloodied the worst, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see what they do.
And I say it also might be helpful to point out is that when El Salvador says it's going to save a lot of money on transaction fees, is that a lot of El Salvadorian families have family members in the United States that send what they call remittance back to El Salvador. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're saving money on transactions is because when they currently use the SWIFT system, which is basically the current standard method for sending US dollars to foreign countries, is that they tend to charge like a $15 like wire charge or something like that, which isn't a huge dollar if you're moving which isn't a huge deal if you're moving millions of dollars. But if you're trying to send $100 back to El Salvador and the bank takes $15 of that every time you do it, it's kind of a big deal. And now they can, Bitcoin doesn't have nearly as high fees for transacting money. So just point that out.
25% of the economy is young workers in the United States sending checks back to their families. So this is no small potatoes for the country of El Salvador. It's a big deal.
Yeah. That's personally why I think that's the biggest reason why they're doing this is $400 million is a lot of money for people that are so poor that, poverty in America doesn't understand poverty anywhere else. These people are desperately poor, and $400 million goes a long way.
That makes sense. All right, so we'll move on to Social Security. And recently, the Social Security Trustees Report was released. And by recently, I mean last week, it was released. It was supposed to be released, I think, in April. So it was a few months late. But basically, they released a report, and they found that the Social Security Trust Fund will be depleted by about 2033, which is 1 year earlier than expected, but about 4 years later than they anticipated when we were in the throes of the pandemic. And Drew, what's your opinion on the Social Security Trustees report?
The report this year wasn't that illuminating. It never really is, in my opinion. This year, the highlight, I think, was how the pandemic affected the projections of Social Security and Medicare. The pandemic, it might increase death tolls in the future. It's affected the fund's income because there's higher unemployment. We're in a lower interest rate environment because of the pandemic. It's almost a scapegoat for politicians to hide behind the pandemic this year. The reality is Social Security system has been rife with future insolvency issues for years. I think that the can will continue to get kicked down the road as long as it possibly can. I can't imagine a politician standing on the campaign stage saying, elect me, I'm going to raise taxes and I'm going to extend the retirement age, and I might even force you to have more kids, and we're going to slash benefits. I don't think that's going to happen. So it really is a major problem, but I think they're going to delay it as long as they possibly can.
Joe?
I have been opposed to Social Security since I was old enough to know how to spell it. I've always thought it's been a horrible program. for anybody who's not first in line. For your grandparents and great grandparents, it was a great deal. But the fact is that your generation will be the first that will expect to receive less in benefits than you actually pay in taxes. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal today about the Tory party in Great Britain raising taxes on the middle class to fund some of their social programs. And the fact is that right now they're paying 28% in taxes for their social welfare system. Well, right now the American public is paying 15.3% for social insurance. The middle class is going to get hosed on this. But the reality is that under the current system, your generation is going to pay a lot more in taxes and get a lot less in benefits in the future. And I'm shocked and surprised as an armchair sociologist why this is not a big deal for folks in the working class generation. I'm at the point now where I'm almost eligible for these benefits. So my level of enthusiasm for fighting it is starting to wane, but I'm just waiting for you guys to pick up the mantle and start fighting this battle on your own.
Alex?
Well, I think Drew mentioned it briefly. Going back to the 1970s, the early 70s, there have been long-term concerns about the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund. As early as the early 90s, they've been targeting the early to mid 2030s as when they think it's going to run out. When that happens, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a 20 to 25% benefit reduction for everybody across the board. And that's because Social Security by law currently cannot run a deficit. It can't ever pay out more than it collects. So for me, hearing it go from 2035 to 2034, not really a surprise. They've been ranging in those predictions for decades now and nothing has been done. I would also assume that nothing is going to happen probably till the late 2020s, early 2030s, when the problem is no longer down the road. It's in front of everybody's face. And you've either got to just let everybody take a pay cut or start making hard decisions about whether to continue the program at all or raise taxes and cut benefits in some combination. So I'm not particularly surprised to hear the news. Come back in 10 years and I'll be a little more surprised at what people might be saying then.
When Social Security was originally conceived, it was just meant to be like a supplementary income for people in retirement as they were living longer. But it's going to be a huge deal because a lot of folks rely solely on their Social Security benefits for income in retirement. They have like zero, it's not a supplement, it's their primary source of income. So if nothing is done and they cut it to 76%, that's going to be a huge cut to people whose primary source of income is Social Security, especially because inflation is in the the 6% range. So you got inflation going up, and then you have your Social Security benefits getting cut by quite a bit. It's going to be a big deal if they don't do something about it. But to Drew's point, who wants to be the politician that raises this issue and be like, hey, we need to do the prudent thing and raise all your taxes and cut spending, and I'm going to be the one to carry this flag to the end zone. Who wants to do that? Because everybody's going to label you as heartless and trying to take away senior citizen benefits. So
not only who wants to do it, who can get away with getting elected running on that platform.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Well, I guess that what really fascinates me is how come those are the terms? Why isn't the terms of why are we continuing to pay 15.3% of our payroll into a system that promises to pay less than my Roth IRA will? I'm shocked and mortified by the number of people who think in terms of we have to do everything we possibly can to save Social Security, instead of people saying, man, we got to encourage people to be self-reliant and save the money that they earned in such a way that they have financial independence.
Well, the reality is, though, you can't cut off retirees. And so somebody's got to keep paying in with the expectation they're getting nothing back.
True, but but if you take both sides of that issue in those two extreme positions, then you can work towards a compromise to where you meet the needs of everybody. But when everybody acts like, oh, we can't gourd this sacred cow, we continue to have these problems. But if we get people's attention by saying, hey, some of us are willing to pay nothing, and they go, oh, wait a minute. I think it would be cruel to cut off benefits for anybody who's under the age of 50, or I'm sorry, over the age of 50, because they paid in for so long. But something has got to happen in order to do the right thing. Otherwise, you're going to end up hurting more people than you help.
Like you mentioned, at least the elderly, the people that are getting benefits now, they're getting something. My generation and the next generations may not have much there for them. I think you got to shift the mindset and thinking, I can't depend on the federal government for my retirement. I don't believe you should anyway, but you certainly shouldn't do it now. Take retirement into your own hands.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Well, when it comes to hygiene for chicken coops, there are two primary schools of thought. There's the traditional method, which involves regular cleanings of the chicken coop, and then there's what they call the deep litter method, where basically you don't clean the chicken coop out regularly. You just take leaves or pine shavings or whatever and layer it on top periodically, and just let the litter in the chicken coop build up over the course of like a 6-month period, and then clean it out twice per year. And I'm curious to get Joe's thoughts on which school of thought you adhere to.
I started out as a traditionalist. When I first acquired chickens, I was very good about cleaning the chicken coop out every couple of weeks. And I found that 2 days after I cleaned the chicken coop, it stunk. But because of the magic of YouTube, I saw that for a lot of folks, they were doing what's called the deep litter method, whereas you put in pine shavings initially, and then as the chickens do their business, then you throw in grass clippings, then you throw in some chipped wood, and then more pine shavings. And what I found was the smell was actually better with the deep litter method, changing it every 6 months, than it was me changing it every 2 weeks. And I think the reason for that is because the microorganisms in the chicken manure end up eating the manure almost as fast as it hits the litter. And it's amazing after 6 months how little chicken manure there is and how much compost there is in your deep litter, which 5 or 6 wheelbarrows full go in our garden, and is a wonderful nitrogen-rich fertilizer for next year.
I'll agree. Back when I was young and ambitious, back in December, I was going to clean my chicken coop out like every 2 weeks, and I found it's kind of like reading the Social Security trustees report. It's very unpleasant, and it's not really how I was spending my free time. So is that because of my laziness and because of Joe's tutelage, I learned about the deep litter method, and I haven't done it yet. So I've been cleaning it out fairly regularly right now. But as of October, I'm going to give it one good cleaning. Spray it down with vinegar. And then I'm not going to touch it again till a spring, and then I'll have some nice compost to do that. So I'll go with the deep litter method because I'm lazy and I don't want to spend any more time mucking out the chicken coop than I have to. I don't know.
What are the chickens? What are the chickens like? No one's asking about the chickens. Do you think they like living in their own filth for 6 months out of the year?
Well, first of all, they are chickens, which is kind of gross, because they are living in their own filth. But what I read though is that in the winter, composting creates heat. So if you're layering the wood chips and you're doing it correctly, that chemical process that's going on inside the chicken coop should be creating a pretty decent amount of heat. And that combined with the feathers on the chicken keeps them pretty warm for those really cold winter months. My chickens are spoiled. We have a heat lamp in there, so nobody's getting cold in my chicken coop. But is that the chickens actually should prefer it because it keeps them pretty warm. But who knows? So Alex, you have anything you want to add to this, or?
I don't have chickens, so I can't speak to that. But I'm very certain this would not work for cats. So that's really my only contribution here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not advised for cats for sure.
No.
All right. Okay, well, that's it for episode 11. I appreciate we've been getting some comments on the videos, which has been kind of nice. So I appreciate everybody's participation. And again, you can always hit the thumbs up button if you like what we're doing. There's also a thumbs down button. So you can also let us know how we're doing in that regard as well. But otherwise, we'll see you next week.